All right, folks, we're going to get started. Thanks again for joining today's webinar entitled, Is Your CRM in the Best Shape That It Could Be? I'm joined today by two panelists. From Interhive, we have Sales Director Joe Przbala, and from Clients First Consulting, we have Dave Whiteside. My name's Adam Stewart, as I said. I head up our sales enablement team here at Interhive. Everybody will be available for questions at the end of the session, so please feel free to either type your questions into the chat box or hold them for the end. With that, I'd like to kick things off here and hand things over to Dave, who's going to begin the presentation by taking us through some of the objectives.
Well, hey, everybody. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here with all of you. And let me start out and just kind of outline a little bit what our objectives are going to be today for our webinar. Number one, we want to understand a little bit of why is CRM so hard, and we're going to talk about some of the most common CRM challenges and how do you plan for and overcome. Next, ERM and CRM in the last few years have become a very popular set of tools to have work together, and so we're going to talk a little bit about why is that and how are firms going about that. And last, we also want to make sure that we take the time to show you a few examples of how do you leverage this ERM plus CRM capability in your marketing business development efforts. So those are the three main objectives that we have today. As we go along, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to use the chat box and certainly shoot your questions in, and we'll have time at the end to handle those as well. So why ERM and CRM? Well, in a simple fashion, law firms are really made up of two key assets, with the main one being the relationships that lawyers have with clients. It is absolutely the most key thing that makes up a law firm. And I would also add that the second, and maybe behind by just a touch, is the specific experience that the lawyers have. In fact, really when you get right down to it, it's relationships plus experience make up a law firm. Yet at the same time, so many firms have difficulties in pulling together a complete database of who do we know, who are our customers and potential customers, basically, and what have we done? What is the work that we've done? And this ability to get all this information into a database so that we can leverage it and use it is just a very, very key activity of a marketing and business development department. But firms are really challenged by that. In fact, as we get to this next photo, I don't know if this looks like anybody's executive committee meeting or not, but I can almost picture a conversation like this going on where they're looking at it and they're saying, you know, we're a store, but we're a store that doesn't have any idea of what our inventory is that's on our shelf. And we don't really have a good idea of who our customers are and our potential customers. So how do we sell things to these people? So I realize that kind of oversimplifies it in a law firm fashion, but this really is an example of why it's so critical to have this information stored in a database. Next, I will say I didn't think of this. I can't take credit for this phrase, but CRM success is a people and process problem disguised as a technology problem. And I can only tell you that I don't know where I first saw that. I can't claim it, but it is extremely true. And I say that because the technology always works. It may not be the perfect technology for you, but rarely is technology the issue. We can almost always identify it back to people and process types of challenges. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out, I'm going to talk about what I call the big three challenges to ERM and CRM success. And these are the things that I see most common in firms that have to be worked through that really are technology neutral. They have nothing to do with the technology. And the first is what I call tribal knowledge. It's this, we've always done it this way point of view. And historically, if you think about a law firm, everybody walked around, they carried their own little piece of the firm with them. These are my relationships, these is my experience, these are my clients. And the firm just kind of learned to exist in that particular fashion. But today, it's very important that a firm be able to institutionalize clients and to be able to, because it's what clients are looking for. They're looking for a place where firm can solve their challenges in a big picture and not have to deal with a different lawyer and potentially a different firm for everything. So as we look at this internally, it's as a marketer, do I understand the culture of my firm? Do they share? Do they play nice? Do I have leadership on board? And there's a whole litany of cultural and what I'll call old habits that first have to be identified and really, I'll just call it dealt with as part of it. And on this next slide, I'm not going to read through all these, but I'll tell you, these are common cultural issues that I see regularly in firms. There's everything from this lack of adoption to the lawyers won't use it. All these different things go on, and these are all people issues. They have nothing, again, to do with the technology. And so the ability to identify these and figure out what's our solution going to be, how are we going to have a communication plan, a training plan, what are all the things that we're going to do to get through these, because if we don't, we're never going to be able to make our CRM successful. Number two, and I will tell you, bad data. And maybe if I was listing these in order, I probably would have put bad data as number one, because bad data, I will tell you, it is the silent killer of a CRM system. In fact, you've probably heard, I think it's the American Heart Association puts what they call hypertension and high blood pressure the silent killer. That's what bad data is. In fact, you'll see these statistics from Gartner, and these are very accurate, legal. About 30% of data gets old every single year, and bad data, it just absolutely is a huge issue. And the reason is, this silent killer, it gets you without you really knowing it. And in fact, if I was to take a second here, I'm going to pick on McDonald's, right? Everybody likes a McDonald's hamburger once in a while. So I'm going to pick on McDonald's because we all know that you should not eat a McDonald's hamburger. There are probably worse things on earth to eat, but that's pretty high up there on things that you just should not eat, but we can't help ourselves. We do it anyway. And the reality is, if the next time we ate a McDonald's hamburger, we dropped dead right on the spot, there's a good chance we wouldn't eat that hamburger. But because it gets you over time, that first hamburger doesn't kill you, and the next, it slowly puts weight on you, it gives you that hypertension and things. And that's kind of how bad data is. It sneaks up on you to the point that all of a sudden it just gets you, and you're done. And there's several different types of bad data. I mean, and you've probably seen all this: duplicate, missing, incorrect. I won't read through all those, but this is just kind of a quick picture of what does it look like. And if we take a second here and we go to what I'll call the CRM data lifecycle, this just kind of gives you a graphic of what goes on. So on day one, when you launch your system, usually the data in there is pretty good. May not be perfect, but it's probably not bad. But what happens over the course of time, that 30% of contact changes every year. Well, what happens here is, people get married, they change jobs, they change roles in their organization. So all sorts of things happen and cause this change. And if we just put the quick math to it, if you've got a 400 lawyer firm, 200,000 contacts in your CRM system, and that's not a huge number by any stretch. Look at how many change every day, over 160 change every day. And that doesn't count the new ones coming in, from people signing up for your newsletters, to your attorneys adding new people, to all sorts of new information coming into the system. So it's just really important that you don't let this go. Data quality is something that you just have to stay on top of on a regular basis. Because if you don't, I will tell you, your lawyers will notice it. And one thing I have seen time and time again, when we meet with a firm and we talk about it, the fact that the lawyers have picked up on the fact that they don't trust the data means the data is bad, which means the system is bad, which means I'm not using it. And once a firm gets to that point with their CRM system, it is very, very hard to recover from that. Number three, I call it over-engineering kills adoption. And I will tell you, if anybody's interested, the graphic that you have there on your screen, that's actually called the Wenger 16999. And that has 87 different implements on it and has 141 functions, according to the Swiss Army knife folks. So if anybody is really looking for overkill in their Swiss Army knife, but it actually is highly representative of a CRM system, because when you look at a CRM system, it can do hundreds, maybe thousands of different things, but no firm needs it to do hundreds of things. In fact, I would say in most firms, if they can identify what are the 3 main things that they want it to do, they'd be in great shape, and really get it so that you can do those 3 things really, really well. Now, those 3 things may vary from office to office, practice to practice, so you may end up with certainly more than 3. But keeping the number manageable and really focusing on the things that are important to the firm. What are the things that move the needle for us the most? And let's get those down. In fact, sometimes I call it kind of a crawl, walk, run. Let's learn to do the basics. Let's crawl. Let's get the fundamentals down. Then we can add on more cool whiz bangs as we go, as they're needed. But let's not try to roll everything out. And honestly, I've been on both sides of the equation. I've been on the consulting side. I've also been on the CRM vendor side. And from a vendor standpoint, there's always this beauty contest, right? When it comes to selling a new system, you're competing with other organizations. So there's a tendency for the vendors to all try to roll out the 100 different things that they do and who has the coolest whiz bangs. And that can make it really difficult to figure out what are the 3 things that we really want it to do. So I encourage firms to really stay focused on that. And what I call the engineering challenge is simplify. And simplify and simplify. Because just like bad data, complexity kills adoption. If something looks hard to use, it is hard to use. And it's just something that you have to work through before you ever roll anything out. Keep your users in mind and build that simplification into your training program. All right, let's take a second here and talk a little bit about why ERM and CRM together. And to start out with that, I'm gonna have a little discussion about, so where do contacts live in a firm today? And the graphic that you're looking at here, this was a 250 lawyer firm, shows 542,000 relationships. This is actual data that came from a client. So what you're looking at there, by 72% of the relationships, the contacts that these attorneys have only existed in email traffic. No one had ever created an Outlook contact record for them. So it makes it difficult sometimes to identify who are all the people that we have relationships with. And this is where the ERM really comes into play. We're going to expand on that a little as we go, because an ERM system is designed to capture, I won't call it 100%, but a very high percentage of the contacts that an organization has. And to kind of take you through the example, I mentioned earlier, the technology works. And I probably worked with a dozen or more different CRM systems in my career. And I can tell you from a technical standpoint, they all performed as advertised. But one of the biggest challenges is they show up on your doorstep as an empty box. There's no data in it. It's got all this functionality, but there's no data in it about who are our contacts and who are our clients and who's our companies. So how do we fill that data, that box, with good data? Well, there's a traditional method for doing that. And traditionally what CRM systems have done is they pull in the Outlook contact records of the users, in this case, the lawyers. And number one, our lawyers aren't always real good about creating Outlook contacts for people. And quite honestly, with the way that Microsoft Outlook works, people get worse and worse. And the reason is I can type in, if I want to contact Adam, I can type ADA and Adam's name pops right into my email box and I email him. I don't have to create an Outlook contact record in order to maintain contact with Adam. So what you end up with, if you only use Microsoft Outlook contact records as a data source, you end up with only about 40%, and that's maybe a high estimate of what you have. Remember our graph before, only 72% were email, 28% had contact records. And so here again, we see about 60% never make it in, 30% change every year. And so when you think about if we used only the Outlook contact records as a data source, that doesn't give us a very complete picture of what we really should have. So let's take a look at how does data really flow from various sources, and how does it get into an ERM system, and then how does it flow to a CRM system. And I know this graph's a little bit on the busy side, but if you start on the left, you've got data sources. So under Microsoft Exchange, we have Outlook contact records, so we're going to pick those up. But an ERM system also has the ability to pull in emails as well as calendar appointments. And once you get that picture, you should have a much more complete look at the people that your lawyers are corresponding with, because there's a very high likelihood they're doing one of those three. I mean, unless they're only sending text messages and talking on a cell phone, there's a very high probability that you're going to capture that contact record from one of those. The ERM system also has the ability, and if I didn't identify it, ERM, Enterprise Relationship Management versus CRM Client Relationship, they work together. But you also have what I'll call the financials, HR systems. These are typically done, for example, a financial system, the most important thing it can do is it can identify who's a client versus who is not. And it can identify how much work have we actually done for each of these clients. So, and then there may be other systems that you want to integrate in there as well. But what the ERM system is very, very good at, it's good at pulling this information together, reorganizing it, getting it all under a single company, getting the contacts under a single company. If we happen to be putting in information about work we've done for that particular company, it can pull that together inside the ERM. Then what it can do is it can be used to feed various systems, one of which is most commonly the CRM system. And it can also be pushed out to SharePoint or other various systems, but the CRM is certainly the most common. And I want to make the point that the fact that it goes through the ERM doesn't mean that there is no data quality work that has to be done. Certainly the ERM system can't identify every possible duplicate, and it can't identify all the possible data quality things that could go on. But it does do a very, very good job of giving you a great head start, of giving you a much more complete collection of information about who do we know, who knows them. Many ERM systems can also put relationship strength on it, so you have an idea of who has the most contact with them. So there's a number of different things that can help here, and thus push it over to your CRM system and enhance your marketing and business development efforts by having a much more complete collection of information. And the last one I'll show you today is to give you an example of what does that look like. And once again, this was taken from an actual client. This is one that I worked on personally, and they had a CRM system for 4 years and a little over 150,000 contacts in there. 4 years later, they added an ERM system, and in 20 weeks, they more than doubled the number of contacts that they had in their system. And that's from pulling from email traffic for where people had never created Outlook contact records. So knowing that these two technologies really complement each other is really important. I know there's a tendency to look, do we need one, do we need the other, but they're very, very complementary in what they can do for a firm. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this over to my partner, Joe, there.
Yeah, so as we kind of talk about, we've talked a little bit about how, CRM needs some work, right? And, by the folks that we know that are attending the event, CRM in legal and actually most industries, it's really hard, right? But the benefit of having a CRM clearly outweighs the work necessary in order to keep it moving along and keep it in good shape over time, right? And so there's a couple things that we want to talk about from an IntroHive perspective and the right tools and how IntroHive can be the right tool to really enhance your CRM experience. And so we're going to talk a little bit about two different hats that we're going to kind of play with. The first one's going to be the marketing and business development folks, and then we're also going to kind of think of ourselves as the attorney experience also, to make sure that we understand what the value they get out of the CRM. Now, if we look at, Dave's talked a lot about those three main challenges with CRM, and we got to take a step back and understand if we are working with a less than optimal or a CRM that has this challenge or data problem, so to speak, if we're not having total confidence in the data, how does that impact the business at the end of the day? How does it impact the number of new clients that we're bringing in, or as equally important, how many clients are we able to manage to retain and keep on growing their business? And so what with CRMs, those less than optimal CRMs, they impacted by having, one, we don't have the right knowledge across the organization, right? We've all told the story, we've all heard the stories about that dreaded email that goes across the firm asking, hey, who do we know at 3M in New York, right? That takes up everyone's time. I'm sure there's a firm that has done a study that kind of figures out the cost to the firm of everyone having to open up that email. The second thing of a less than optimal CRM is the trust and actually the accuracy of your mail campaigns or your targeting of potential clients. Just imagine your attorney's coming in and asking, hey, I'm traveling to New York, or I'm going to go to Boston, and he or she's in the insurance or financial services practice, and they say, hey, can you give me a list of 10 folks that we're not doing business with that I could reach out to and tell them I'm in town and I'd love to have coffee or lunch with? That's going to be problematic if the information's incorrect. And at the end of the day, that's going to really impact the attorney's confidence level in whatever marketing or BD's providing them, and they're going to be probably a little upset. And we take that to the farthest end, and the promises of ROI or being able to say, hey, this is why we're spending tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and some firms the millions of dollars a year to manage your CRMs, and being able to go back and say, we got this value out of the system. And when people are skeptical, they may or may not believe that, and ask whether or not we really need to have a CRM at the end of the day, even though all the folks on the phone, and Dave and myself included, truly believe that CRM is a value add to any organization. So what does this look like? It's February now. We've all had our New Year's resolution of getting and eating better, and some of us may even join a new gym or sign up for some classes. I like to do spin, and so I've been spending a lot of time in the saddle. But for CRM, what does that mean, right? How do we make sure that we keep our data clean, we keep it updated, kind of to Dave's point, making sure that we have the right tools in place, and more importantly, not being solely dependent on the attorney in order to provide that information to BDM marketing. Because if there's one activity that attorneys dread more than even submitting their time on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, it's updating contacts and providing a marketing list over to marketing for an event. And so when we put on that attorney's hat, we need to realize that we need to make it super simple. And at some point, our goal here at IntroHive is actually to take the whole process away from the attorney and turn it into more of a value add situation that they are not participating other than getting information. And I kind of want to tailor it to thinking of it this way. I don't want them to be data producers. I'd like the attorneys to be data consumers. And I think at IntroHive, we have a couple great pieces of features that really get the attorneys in the right direction and really understanding what's going on with CRM from a BDM marketing perspective. Next slide, please. So from our perspective at IntroHive, we see ERM in a couple different ways. We see that we want to do three things. We want to be able to give the attorneys an ease of understanding the relationship between the firm and your clients or prospects. We want to engage those attorneys to participate in CRM. And lastly, we want them, we also want to provide really good, rich contact information back to the CRM. So on that first note of giving attorneys rich relationship intelligence, what we do is, whether it's based on a single invite from their Outlook or maybe on a weekly basis or an ad hoc basis, we like to provide a pre-meeting digest. And what this means is that we're bringing together relevant relationship data, and here we can kind of see that we can put in company news. So if we're meeting with a firm, let's say Stellar Mobile in this example, we're going to show the most recent news about Stellar Mobile. We partner with firms like Manzama or Courtwire News or different organizations that aggregate news so that we can have the right piece of information, the right tailored experience related to that company news for the attorney. A couple other components that we want to bring in here is data from the CRM. Has this particular individual updated their contact information? Have we sent emails back and forth? Maybe we want to give the attorney a reminder like, hey, you've spoken to Dave or Adam in the last week. Just a kind of friendly reminder to really understand what the conversation is going to be about. And it's just a nice thing to kind of use as that first piece of conversation right when we walk in the door. Additionally, what we also like to show is who has a relationship with the folks who are going to be in the meeting, right? That's always a key thing is, if attorney is going to a new pitch, and it's always useful to know who's going to be in the room. Sometimes the client or the prospect is bringing a couple new folks, and what IntroHive does is it understands who has accepted the invitation, and without really, and if those names or those contacts aren't into CRM yet, we'll be able to identify who those folks are. We have a number of proprietary databases that we're able to go ahead and find those individuals and be able to share that data with the attorney. So when they walk in that meeting, they're not getting blindsided by somebody who they weren't expecting to show up for the conversation. So it really, personally, it's helped me in a number of occasions where I thought I was going to meet one-on-one with a CMO, and luckily he and she had invited some of their BD and CRM folks, and that helped enhance that conversation, but I was quickly prepared for that. A couple other things, and these are kind of like components and modules that can be configured for a particular attorney or a group, but a couple of other cool things that we do is we show a relationship strength. What's going on between your firm and your clients in terms of that relationship? So we kind of look at what the person's job title is. So we have a different weighting for, let's say, a CMO or a general counsel than we would maybe for an associate or a secretary, right? So there's a different weighting for that relationship. We can also keep track of pitches. So if you have like a pitch automation tool, or if you keep track of this stuff in an Excel spreadsheet, why don't you pull that data into this pre-meeting so the attorney really knows what the heck's going on, so they're not pitching other work, or more importantly, they can answer the question that all your clients are asking you. And that question is, why don't you really understand our relationship? And more importantly, why don't you understand my business? So we kind of think of IntroHive as an intelligence layer that can bring various pieces of information from the organization into one place for the attorney to really understand what's happening for a 5-minute review before they walk into the meeting. So a couple other components here I'd like to just show. On the top right-hand corner, can we just go back, Adam? Sorry. Upper right-hand corner, we track who's moving, like what job titles are happening. So we can provide alerts to the attorney so that they're aware of maybe a GC move from one client over to a competitor, and that might be a new opportunity. So once the attorneys have the meeting, we do something that's a post-meeting email that goes to them after the meeting and says, hey, what happened? And so it goes to all the internal folks at the firm and says, hey, what happened at the meeting? And once I answer the email, and I can do this all on my mobile device, and once I share that, the email, the notes get shared with all the participants, the internal participants, so they can kind of debrief and really understand if everyone got the same thing out of that meeting. We all have our marching orders. In addition to that, we can kind of create an activity or a task for a team member that says, hey, we had a great meeting with Jacob. We need to send a proposal with him by Wednesday, and I want to assign that to Adam. I can do that and push that data, let's say, into your interaction CRM, or if you have Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, it can be right there and a part of somebody's task list, and they're very knowledgeable of what is required moving forward. So this is, changing that hat, right, and having the attorney share information with the CRM without necessarily knowing that they're logging into interaction or into the CRM. It's kind of a disguised way to get people to really work in and be participatory with what's happening with business development. And so those are the two places that we're really giving information to the attorney. We also provide attorneys or the assistants in that matter a way to share contacts if they want to do this. Now, it's not required. It only enhances the experience for the CRM, but they receive an email on a daily or weekly basis that says, hey, listen, you connected with these folks. You've sent an email or you've shared some information with these individuals. Do you want to pass that along to the CRM? And most folks on the phone will say, the attorney won't do this, right? Well, we can also work with ways where it's there's an auto sync that passes over that information as well. And so now we're having really rich data go into the CRM, and we're much more knowledgeable about what's happening between the attorney and the particular client. And that's getting those new relationships into the CRM. So that's one of the only places where we're really asking the attorney to get to provide data. Now, if we turn the hat on and put on the BDM Marketers Hat, this is really where if that email, typically I mentioned about 3M, that we want to do a pitch in New York City for 3M. What we can do is, and this is the IntroHive portal, we kind of embed directly into most CRMs, but we also have a standalone portal where I can just go in and type in 3M or Stellar Mobile in this example, and it's going to show me everybody who we have a relationship with, and more importantly, who has the strongest relationship within the firm. So in the growing legal market where we have firms merging or acquiring other firms, this is going to be very, very important and very useful, knowing across these multiple organizations who actually knows folks. We've talked to a number of firms who are going through mergers, and they're like, hey, listen, we don't know who we know from the other firm in Florida. We do a lot of real estate work there. It would be great if we could look that information up. This is something that we can do within 2 or 3 weeks, right? Get that up and running and know the entire spider web of relationships across the firm. And that's all done right here in the portal. Super simple and easy to do. Next slide. And so just to kind of show where IntroHive can really help and where we've worked with a large professional services firm, what we were able to do is identify almost 750,000 contacts for this organization. But more importantly, what we were able to do is increase the number of notes and activities pushed into CRM. And that's really where you as business development and marketing folks really can take advantage of that data, really understand who your clients are, who you should be targeting, rather than just saying, hey, listen, we're doing this type of event. Well, you know what, let me just see all our insurance clients in Chicago or New York. But we can get really down into the data and understand who's attending the events, who's RSVPing, and being able really to figure out who are the best targets. So we're very specific in our events. And if you're able to do that, then you can have more leads, right? You can have more new business, new pitches, and you can kind of go over that. And so what does that mean in real dollars? Okay. By using an ERM like IntroHive, there's real savings in terms of enriching data, being able to get data from all these separate data sources that we provide in conjunction with a team like from Clients First, right? That they're working hand in hand with your team to make sure that the data is as incredible as possible, so that when you are working with your CRM, you can feel super confident in the data, right? And at the end of the day, that's what really keeps most folks up at night when they're responsible for a CRM program and kind of developing marketing lists. And so this case study isn't just a single example. This is something that we hear from a lot of our clients. We've had some great examples and great situations at our clients like Grant Thornton here in the U.S. with PricewaterhouseCoopers, among others, who are really enjoying what they're doing with IntroHive. And so to kind of wrap up, something that both IntroHive and Clients First really focuses on, and I think Dave brought up a couple great points here, is to really acknowledge what your firm's good at and where you need help in terms of the process and the people who are part of that process, right? And if you have a team that maybe Clients First can really help to really enhance your records and make sure that the data is clean, you can use a service additionally like IntroHive to really kind of supercharge it, to kind of bring great additional information so that the CFC team is super successful, so that you can then go back and say, we're a successful CRM program. And it doesn't matter the technology. It doesn't matter what CRM, so to speak, that you have in place. It's really about making sure that you have the right people and the process in place so that the technology really shines and is able to give you the most functionality and bang for your buck. So with that, I'll let Adam kind of let us know what questions you folks have added, so we can kind of go over those and finish this webinar up for everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that, and thanks, Dave. We do actually have some questions. While I'm going through these, please feel free to add your own questions to the chat section or the questions section of GoToWebinar. So the first one is from Karen in Atlanta, and Dave, this looks like it might be directed at you. But how do we know what type of shape our CRM is really in? Is there a quick test to find out?
That is a great question, because there's probably several tip-offs if it's in good shape or if it needs some love. From a data quality standpoint, I'll kind of address that first. Oftentimes you might take a look at, are you getting a lot of bounces on your email campaigns, and some things like that can be kind of obvious sources. At the other end of the extreme, hopefully you're not getting complaints from your lawyers, but that obviously is another very obvious one. But I would say that, just as a rule of thumb, if it's been 30, 60 days or more since anybody has really attended to the data and made sure that the records are up to date, there's a very good chance that you've got a fair amount of out-of-date information. And there are a couple of things that can be done. Depending on the system that you have, it gets done in different ways. But there's actually a data quality analysis that we run for firms, and I think some firms can probably run that on their own, or maybe the vendor can run it. But what it'll do is it'll go in and it'll tell you how many duplicates do we have, when was the last time things were updated, and can kind of give you a snapshot of what your data looks like at a given point in time. And so that is one thing. And then there's also sometimes, if you've gone through version upgrades and you haven't really given the system itself, not just the data, but the system itself attention, there's also system configuration overviews that can be done. and analysis so that you can figure out, do we really have this system optimized and configured to fit our business requirements today? And so sometimes it even requires you to go back and kind of revisit what are our business requirements. If we taken the time to re-examine those a little bit and then figure out, do we really have the system configured to do exactly what we want it to do? So that's kind of a big question, and there's a lot to it, but that would be kind of my quick, just kind of a quick overview answer. I'm certainly glad to, if somebody wants to contact me offline, glad to talk more about it.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. Next question is from Mark in Indianapolis. We're looking at replacing our CRM since the data is beyond repair. What are our best options once we decide on a new CRM? Joe, that's probably one for you.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So yeah, that's something that we hear quite often, and so there's a number of ways to kind of do that. If you feel like the data is like completely out of whack and there's no confidence in it whatsoever, something that we do is we can actually populate your new CRM, or some firms have gone forward with, they're in the process of looking for a new CRM, and they just want to be able to start getting all that rich data. So what we can do is we can kind of install IntroHive at the organization, at the firm, and that will go ahead and build the entire database, or the entire, all the relationships and everyone that knows who at your clients and prospects, so that when you do make that decision on the CRM, that we can automatically populate it with a deduplicated database with all the relationships mapped. And so once you start that CRM program, you're off and running in a really good way with great data. Great question.
Excellent. Next one is from Keith in Dallas. What are the two or three most common mistakes you see firms make with CRM? Dave, why don't you take that one?
Okay. You know what? That really is a great question, because they tend to be very in the same pattern. And oftentimes, where I'll first spot that is you might see something come across a listserv, for example. And it says, "Hi, everybody. We've decided that we need a CRM system, and we're wondering what system out there works the best." And so what has happened here is a firm has kind of gotten the technology in front of their business requirements. And so what I would always encourage a firm to do is do a good study of your culture and your business requirements before you even start looking at technology. And once you figure out what exactly do we want a CRM or an ERM CRM combined to do for us, then you can start looking at technology, because now you know what you're looking for. Earlier I made that comment about how the vendors come in and they show you a lot of things, and that can just, once a firm has looked at 3 or 4 demos of CRM systems, they kind of get this glazed over look on them, because they've seen so much functionality that the systems almost start to look the same. And so having a good idea of exactly what are our business requirements and what exactly do we want this system to do for us helps you sort through all that information and clutter that can go on from going through the demonstration process and the review process and all that. So that would be one of the very, very first things that I would look at right there.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. A few more questions here coming in. This is Jen from New York City. We're a global firm that's worried about CASL, that's the Canadian anti-spam legislation, and GDPR, Global Data Protection Compliance. How can we ensure that we are complying with these regulations? Joe, you want to take that?
Yeah. So, interesting enough, these two regulations kind of go in the same direction, but the GDPR goes off and makes a big right turn. So CASL is different because it just requires consent. And so what that means is that as long as you have business dealings with the organization, you can market to them and you can display that you have consent. Where GDPR is really distinct in that you have to have actually confirmed, and the person actually has to say, yes, I want you to market to us. And so you have to look at them in different ways. In terms of Castle, we had a large professional services firm in Canada reach out to us and say, hey, we need some help identifying contacts to build marketing lists. Can you help us with that? And so because IntroHive looks at all the activities, the emails, everything, all the dealings between your organization and your clients and prospects, we were able to provide them with a list that exceeded their wildest expectations in terms of the total number of contacts that was produced for that particular list. Now, GDPR is a whole different bear because technology is really hard to get express consent. And so most of us, if we received an email from one of our vendors that we work with, said, hey, we're updating our contact list and our marketing list, tell us what you want to hear from us, they'd probably have a less than spectacular response rate. And so something that we can do, and we've been talking to clients about this, is being able to, in our pre-meeting digest, tell individuals or the attorney specifically that says, hey, you're meeting with Adam and Dave today. They were on this list. Can you please ask them if they will consent to continue to be on this list? And so then if the folks say yes, that's something that the attorney could write into the notes of the post meeting, and then that data would then be pushed into CRM, and then we would have a record of that consent. So that's one way. There, and the difficulty with GDPR is each law firm, each organization out there has a different interpretation of GDPR. We're pretty flexible in terms of supporting finding ways to identify that potential consent and those potential relationships so that you can ask for that consent. So we can definitely help with that if you need some support.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Next question comes from Ed in Toronto, and this is about signature scraping. So we've typically relied on signature scraping as a means of updating our data. Do you recommend that as a good approach to data management? Joe, I don't know if you want to take that one, or I can help on that one.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and take that, Adam? You're kind of more of the person on the front lines of tech and understanding how we do that.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, signature scraping, for those of you that don't know, essentially means that you've got some tool that is processing your emails that are inbound and outbound to the firm and looking for new contacts at the bottom of an email message. So we actually have that as part of our data enrichment suite at IntroHive, but we actually layer that in with a bunch of different other mechanisms to find people's contact information, as well as widening the breadth of the contacts we're looking at. So if you think about signature scraping, for example, some emails are going to actually have that, and that'll be at the bottom of the email thread. So that's great. Some are not going to have a signature at all, and others, you're going to miss people that are on the to and the CC line and whatnot. So you want to kind of use that as one of those layers to increase your data management or your quality and your quantity of contacts. Another thing to be aware of is, like I said off the top, looking at if you have a third party that's actually looking at the contents of your emails. Oftentimes that can be a little bit sticky for information security groups and privacy groups within law firms. So take a solid look at that, and also look at some of the alternatives. I'd be happy to kind of share more information on that if you guys want. If you guys do have any follow-up questions or whatnot, or would like us to be in contact with you, please feel free to just put your phone number into the chat there as a private message, and we'd be happy to follow up with you. And otherwise, our contact information is on the screen here. Give it another 10 or 15 seconds there for any more questions that might roll in. There's one question that came in here about using different email systems with IntroHive. So IntroHive actually uses email systems from a wide range, including the Microsoft Outlook, Exchange, Office 365 suite. We even have firms using Gmail and even Lotus Notes, if you can believe that. So we're well connected into those from email sources. As Dave pointed out earlier, you want to look at a whole host of different sources for grabbing your contact and your activity records. All right, that looks like it's the end of the list here for questions. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. Especially wanted to thank Dave and Joe for sharing their time here, and you guys for sharing your time with us. Please feel free to follow up with us. And if not, we look forward to seeing you at one of the legal marketing events over the next several months. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.